I'm here to tell you why this movie might actually be a huge flop. One of the actors that came to set came with the Delta virus on them, and they later died of COVID. Hey guys, it's Jeff, and I'm here to tell you why I think the movie Emancipation might be in big trouble. Now, just so you know, I was on set for 3.5 weeks, so I am not speaking through hearsay, although some of the things I heard I cannot personally verify, but most of these I can. So originally this movie was supposed to shoot in Atlanta, Georgia. Because of the voting laws that had just passed that everyone deemed as negative towards minorities, the production decided to give a middle finger to Georgia and move down to Louisiana. And this would prove to be their biggest issue. Now, by giving a middle finger to Georgia and moving to Louisiana, they were sending a message of like, hey, you know, maybe don't enact these laws that are against minorities and make it harder for them to vote. But by moving to Louisiana, they moved their production to a place that has had those laws in place for decades. So I'm not really sure if that was a good move or not, but the things that follow certainly make it not a good move. Now, when we initially started shooting, we were in period piece clothing, which is wool, which is incredibly hot. We were shooting on days that had 120 degrees heat index. Now, once it hits that high, productions have to shut down until it cools down because they have to keep the cast and crew safe. So people were put into cooling tents and they were provided shade and given lots of cold water, but there were 350 extras on set that very first day. Now, the following day, so many of them thought that those conditions were bullshit that 250 of them did not return. So they went from 350 extras to 100. But what do you gotta do? You just gotta keep shooting. So they did. And some people get heat stroke and they get dragged off into these AC pods where they rapidly cool down. And its entire job is to make sure that they survive. And they do. Everyone did. Well, except for one guy. So what had happened was Louisiana became the epicenter outbreak of the Delta variant of the virus, to the point where the National Guard had to get involved. Now, this movie was shooting 1 hour north, roughly about 1 hour north of New Orleans. And a lot of the cast and crew came from New Orleans. And with how contagious the Delta virus was in New Orleans, I think you can all see where this is going. Everyone started getting sick really quickly. Now, to Apple's credit, they did do their best to make sure that everyone was safe. Everyone had to wear a mask. Everyone had to be vaxxed to be on set, and they had to take a test proving that they were in fact negative. And it was encouraged that if possible, please stand 6 feet apart. But sometimes when the camera starts rolling, you can't be 6 feet apart. Like you just can't. Because how weird would the movie be if everyone was literally 6 feet apart at all times for all scenes? No one's gonna watch that movie. Well, unfortunately, one of the actors that came to set came with the Delta virus on them, and they later died of COVID. This caused Apple to shut down production for a week. Now, while they do this, they are literally paying everyone and housing everyone. There are additional costs that have been incurred that were not originally planned. Now, of course, there's contingency finances planned into most films, but things are going to start deteriorating really rapidly after this. Apple shuts down for a week and they hire 2 of the leading Delta variant scientists to do a Zoom call, which is an open Zoom call, so anyone that is tied to the production beyond being an extra had access to the Zoom link and they could join, of which I did. It was very insightful and also terrifying. Going forward, everyone had to show up on set by 4 a.m., maybe 4:30 if you're lucky. Everyone had to start taking rapid tests. Now, these are not the rapid tests that you go to Walgreens and CVS and pick up for like $25. These are the expensive tests. You typically about $100 per person, and you don't get your results in 15 to 20 minutes. You can get them in as long as up to 4 hours. Now, most shoot days are typically about a 12-hour shoot day. Sometimes it goes as high as 16. These tests can take up to 4 hours, and the production can't get started until everyone's cleared, least of all the production heads and the cast. This is removing 4 of the 12 hours of every shoot day, and it's adding it as time goes on. So what has happened is we've lost or gained, shooting has gained 50% more shooting time? I don't even know if I said that correctly. Oh, and as people are getting COVID, like when they're getting sick, they can't come back for 2 weeks, which makes sense. We don't want it to spread. But what that does is it doubles labor costs for those specific roles. Because as someone is sent home to wait for 2 weeks, Apple has to hire what's called day players. Now, these day players may be coming from other productions or just downtime to fill that gap, that 2-week gap. So Apple is paying these day players, but they also have to pay the people that are sick at home with COVID. So the labor costs for these roles, like, whether it's crew or cast, is now being doubled. So add that on top of all the other costs I just mentioned that have been incurred, and things are starting to get really expensive really quick. Now, originally this movie was supposed to wrap in September, but it did not wrap until December 18th, but there's a lot more reasons as to why it's not just this. So after about a week or so, the gears get going, and everything kind of like finds its pace, and we have people from Apple that are coming around, we're changing masks every 4 4 hours or staying, as far apart, even further apart as humanly possible. But everything was done in a professional way. I do have to hand it to Apple for the size of the production. They did a very good job. But I am not here to commend Apple. I'm here to tell you why this movie might actually be a huge flop. Everything's going, we're shooting, everything's great. Yay, we have things figured out. But then a little something called Hurricane Ida comes and hit set. Hurricane Ida was the second strongest storm to ever hit Louisiana on record, falling only behind Katrina. It landed as, I believe, a Category 4, and the damage it did to set was mind-blowing. And then after that, they had to take 6 weeks to rebuild set. Now, while set is being rebuilt, the production has to pay everyone. So during these 6 weeks, they're still housing people and they're still paying individuals, even though no work is being done, because they're contracted onto this movie. They have to get paid. They can't go work on anything else. So set's been rebuilt, everyone's coming back, and everyone is gearing up to do a 150-person gun battle, because again, this takes place during the Civil War. There's got to be a gun battle. Everything seems to be good, smooth sailing, and then Alec Baldwin shoots someone on set. This sent shockwaves through the industry, almost on a scale bigger than COVID. All of a sudden, any production that had a gun involved, which, let's face it, it's almost all of them because this is America, they had to get more armorers on set. They had to make sure they had real, legitimate people that knew what they were doing. So, of course, this pushes Apple's timeline back again. But eventually everything gets in the clear and they are able to shoot the scene. Everything is hunky-dory and fine-ish. Because now things have extended so much that Apple had to buy out Will Smith's entire next production. Now keep in mind, this was supposed to wrap in September. At this point, we're about November. And Will Smith technically was supposed to be done by this time. But another production needed him. So what did Apple do? They bought out that entire production, the whole thing. They bought it out. So Apple has now incurred that cost. And eventually it gets to the point where they're considering shutting down production and just taking like a big L on the whole thing. But they're close enough to the end where they decide to push through. And you know what? Finally they do. They make it to the end. They wrap shooting December 18th. Everything is great. Everything is cool. Except the Oscar moment. Will Smith slaps Chris Rock, and all of a sudden everyone is calling out to boycott Will Smith. In a movie he's tied to, they're saying they should shut down the production. Some productions are actually considering it. People are boycotting stuff that he's been in, all because he experienced, quite honestly, a very human moment that none of us, 0 of us, will get to experience. Because unless you go to the Oscars and Chris Rock is making a joke about your family, it's not going to happen to you. So, of course, this is another huge setback. And that is actually not even the icing on the cake for the overall cost of this production. The icing of the cake is the cost that Apple paid to acquire this script and the IP, the rights to shoot this movie, was a mind-blowing $120 million. Most movies that are shown in theaters have half that budget, even less. So when you take the purchase of the script and the purchase of the rights, that's $120 million. And then you add all the delays tied to this movie, having to change states to shoot, having delays because of rain, the delays because of lightning, the delays because of a hurricane, having to rebuild, having the Delta virus, testing every day of every individual and all the masks and all the additional personnel that are needed to make sure that everyone is following proper protocols, and then having to pay double the labor because you people that are getting sick, you have to send them home and still pay them, but then you have to bring in your day players and make sure they're getting paid, and then paying everyone while they're at home for 6 weeks while sets being rebuilt, and then bringing in additional individuals after you had to delay shooting again to make sure that the gun battles go off smoothly. This is adding up to be an extremely expensive movie. And this is not even taking advertising costs into account. The advertising costs for the movies that you see ads on, these movies typically have advertising costs that are anywhere from 30% to 50% of the shooting budget. So we're already looking at a shooting budget that is quite honestly, I'm just going to throw it out there, probably around 400 to 500 million after you take into the account the purchase of the script. So most scripts that are purchased, by the way, for like Pirates of the Caribbean, just to kind of put this into context, were between $1 and $5 million. This is $120 million for an unproven IP, for something that does not have a proven track record. And Apple's just swinging for the fences hoping that this will work. And that's not taking into account all of the other small costs that were incurred. There was an entire pit filled with mannequins. They cost anywhere between $1,000 and $10,000 each per mannequin. $10,000, 1 to 10,000. The agreement was no damage was supposed to come to them. Well, guess what? They burned down on like the first day. All of them. They all caught on fire, and like their like skin is like burning open, and there's like sofa material that's coming out, and that's catching on fire too. And it's making all these toxic fumes, and I mean, it's a bad situation. To Apple's credit, though, they did not force anyone to be in like that very dangerous scenario. In fact, they actually encouraged, hey, don't stand by the toxic fumes, please. So good job, Apple. I gotta give that to you guys. Yeah, this is a lot of cost to incur. And also just to put a normal budget into perspective for you, not even normal budget, just to put like another very expensive movie's budget in perspective for you, Avengers Endgame, the final Avengers movie with all of those huge casts and CGI and green screen and the VFX and the sound effects and literally every facet that went into that movie that has a proven track record by Marvel. That movie cost $356 million to make. That was the budget for that movie, $356 million. And Emancipation, before advertising costs, has very likely eclipsed that. And I honestly don't think Emancipation's gonna be able to make their money back. I think Apple's just gonna have to take a loss on this. But there is actually one reason why it could make its money back. It's because Will Smith he's a good guy. He made a mistake, and I think most people have been able to forgive him. I've been fortunate to work with a lot of actors in the industry, and a lot of them have been corrupted by the job they have. Actors, we're talking props. That's all we are. We're literally talking props. We are told where to stand, what to do, and what to say. We're Muppets, meat skin Muppets. That's literally what we are. And there are actors who are leads in indie features that walk around like they're hot shit. Dude, you're the lead on an indie film. Fuck off. Like, you're nothing special. But Will Smith, he is something special because his career, the trajectory that his career has had, there are very few people that will ever live and not be corrupted by it. Here's two case in points, just from what I experienced alone on set. There's a scene where the mannequins they're burning bodies. Obviously, the camera has to be able to push in at some point to show that it's actual people. They get some featured extras down there and they put them down there, and they're only down there for about 20, maybe 30 minutes max. And when they get out, you know what Will Smith does? He has the entire cast and crew applaud for them, and he gives them each $1,000. Who does that? No one does that. That is not something you come across in Hollywood. That just does they're all about saving money everywhere they can. And here's Will Smith giving these individuals each $1,000. No one does that. And the second thing that I experienced was actually personal. So if you look at me, it's very obvious that I am white. I'm a white guy. Even for white people, I'm like super white. And for whatever reason, they have me shirtless in this scene. And for 3.5 weeks, every day on set, I have to go out there shirtless. There are a lot of dudes that are out there that are way tanner than I am, but for whatever reason, they pick me. So I'm being covered in sunscreen like every 10 minutes, and I'm drinking like an entire case of water every day. I lost 10 pounds of water weight in the first week. Not complaining at all, just to be clear, it was just that hot. But it got to a point where Will Smith's character was looking at my character, and the sun was out, no clouds. It sucked. And then Will Smith looks around and he sees the cameras aren't on me, they're on him. So he asks Anton Fuqua, the director, he's like, hey man, does this guy like need to be here? Like, I can make my own eye line, like, we're actors, it's what we do. And Anton's like, nah man, he doesn't need to be there. So Will Smith's like, dude, go catch some shade. He didn't have to do that. He didn't have to take the time to ask Anton to make sure I was comfortable, and he did. Most actors in that situation that were in his position, that are actually have even seen far less success than him, probably would not have done that. Not saying most, not all. There are some good people out there. There are good people in the industry. They are just so far and few in between. But the fact that he did that, I mean, I will respect that dude for the rest of my life. It's not like he like saved my life, but he certainly saved me from a lot of misery. And I think most actors, if they were in that position and they had that power, would have just left me there. Because it's a power trip, It's a power trip knowing that you have the power to just get someone off set so they can be in the shade. Acting is just such a fucked up thing. Talking props, man. That's all we are. That's it. Anyway, all of this to say, Emancipation, extremely expensive movie, not by choice. So I think there's a very real chance that this may be one of the biggest flops in Hollywood history, but honestly, I hope it isn't. Everyone that was on this set, they were good people. There were so many people on set that were from Louisiana, and I mean, that Louisiana Southern hospitality thing, like, that's a real thing. Like, people in Louisiana, by and large, the vast majority of them are nice people. And that's because the weather and the living conditions in Louisiana suck so much that you gotta be nice, you know? But now you know, if Emancipation flops, and I hope it doesn't, those are the reasons why. Thanks. See y'all around.